Planning Commission meeting of April 24th. We'd like to begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. Please stand.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Commissioner Hopkins, could you take roll, please?
Certainly. Commissioner Voigt?
Here.
Commissioner Murphy?
Here. Commissioner
Mitchell?
Here.
Commissioner Grissom?
Here.
Commissioner Hopkins here. Commissioner Newsom is absent. Commissioner Chairperson Fox?
Here.
We have quorum of the Planning Commission. We also have President Township Planning Director Dave Campbell.
All right. Next up, item 4, approval of the meeting agenda.
I move to approve the meeting agenda as presented.
A second.
Motion to approve from Commissioner Mitchell, second from Commissioner Grissom. Are there any changes? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Next up, item 5. We have meeting minutes from 2 meetings. It'll take 2 motions, please.
I move to approve the March 13th, 2014 Planning Commission meeting minutes.
Second that. We have a motion from Commissioner Hopkins, second from Commissioner Voigt. Are there any changes? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Next.
I move to approve the April 10th, 2014 meeting minutes.
I second. All right. Motion to approve from Commissioner Grissom, second from Commissioner Murphy. Are there any changes? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Item 6, call to the public. Is there anybody that wants to say anything this evening? All right, we'll move on. Item 7, public hearing. We have none. So that brings us to item 8A, which is site plan application number 519, Town and Country Animal Clinic. I think the way we'll do this is invite the applicant up. We'll have our planner, David Campbell, give us a brief overview, and then what we'll do is go through, allow the applicant anything they'd like to add, and then we'll go through the planning director's letter. And we'll have 3 conversations between the 3 parties. So with that, we'll turn it over to David.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Hopefully the members of the Planning Commission had an opportunity to read the Planning Department's review letter for this site plan application, letter dated April 16th, 2014. This particular application came in originally in October 2013, and the Planning Department did a review along with Township Engineer, Fire Marshal, the typical reviewing agencies. We had some issues that we were hoping the applicant could address prior to bringing it to the Planning Commission. The applicant did so, and we received a revised submittal in March with a even further revised landscape plan on April 15th, 16th. And it's those plans that you had received in your Planning Commission packets and hopefully had an opportunity to review. The proposed project is a veterinary clinic on the south side of M59, east of the expressway, on a shared commercial driveway on the south side of M59 called Progressive Drive. The subject property obviously is outlined here on the aerial, and the area where the proposed veterinary clinic is proposed to be constructed is in this kind of cleared and higher area, approximately midpoint of the property. The veterinary clinic proposed is about 5,500 square feet. A veterinary clinic is a principal permitted use in the OS Office Service District, which is what this particular property is zoned. The Planning Department did a review of all the relevant aspects of the zoning ordinance with this particular project, including parking and landscaping and lighting and building materials. The engineer looked at the stormwater management. Fire Marshal looked at issues like circulation. And all of those reviews are included in your packet and also summarized to some degree in the Planning Department's review letter. The recommendation of the planning department is conditional approval of the site plan application pending some determinations by the planning commission with respect to some issues regarding landscaping, some issues regarding the building materials, and some other things that both the planning department and some of the other reviewing agencies hope could be addressed if and when this particular project gets to construction plans. I'm happy to answer any particular questions now, or we can give the applicant and the applicant's architect an opportunity to present their site plan, and if some specific questions arise with any particular aspects of the planning department's letter, I'm happy to address them.
All right, thank you. Good evening. If we could get you to introduce yourself, that would be great.
Good evening. My name is Kevin Hart. I'm the architect for Kurt and Christine Gerster, two veterinarians that want to locate their new business at this location. I did bring an updated photometric plan that I had promised Mr. Campbell that I'd have last week. We were running a little bit late with it, but we were able to adjust up the foot candle requirements, or enlarge the lamps and lumens to get the minimum of 5 foot candles throughout the site. So I'd like to, if I could give these to you now.
Great. Thank you.
With me tonight is Dr. Gerster, and we'll answer any questions you might have regarding the operation of the facility. This is the Gerster facility very similar to the project that they did in Brighton about 11 years ago. And that, I think if you had a chance to see that on old US 23, you'll see the type of quality and the commitment to the community that they have in Brighton. And they want to continue that and to also to bring that with them to this community in Hartland. They're very excited about being a part of this community. They spent several years trying to find a property that was suitable, and one of the things that we knew when we first started, that this was a very challenging site, and that a lot of the commissioners and the engineering department and people in Hartland were very concerned about it. And Kurt and Christine are committed to being very good stewards to that property. We've been really careful to keep as much of the topography and the foliage in place. The materials that they're going to be using are not necessarily, we're not able to get a LEED certified building here, but a lot of the products we're using are very sustainable. They're recycled materials and also very cost-effective and very efficient for energy savings and for sound attenuation, and trying to leave as little of a carbon footprint on the site as they could. The water management was a challenge, and that's been handled. We worked very closely with the engineering department to make sure that none of this the stormwater is going to leave the site. It's going to be contained in large cauldrons that will release the rainwater at the rate that was acceptable to the engineering department. We worked very closely with them. We do want to use some of this water for recycling on the site. We do want to try to use some of the gray water for usage with irrigation on the site, and we do want to try to contain and reuse some of the rainwater that does come off of the parking lot. The brick that you see, I have the samples for the brick on the building. I think it's really important that Kurt and Christine are both very avid historians about this area, about the city of Detroit, and about the southeastern Michigan history. And the brick that we're using is going to be it's reclaimed brick from the Fort Wayne project down in Detroit on the riverfront. And during World War II, the warehouses and the factories there were the factories that built tanks and B-17 bombers for World War II, and a lot of this brick that we're going to be using, in fact, all the brick we're going to be using is going to be reclaimed from that site. And we've worked closely with Glengarry and with some of the brick companies in Detroit to make sure that we get that lot. So a lot of that brick is going to have some history, and
Christine and Kurt are kind of excited about that. The wood siding and product on the house or on the structure, I said house because we do want this to look like a residential, have a residential feel. The siding and trim product are going to be recycled AZEK and recycled AZEK material, which is a molded millwork. And then you can see along here, all this cedar shake-like product is actually hardy-like. It's a cementitious fiber board. It's very tough, very resilient to moisture and to insect penetration, and also UV. It's very resistant to UV. Right? So it's very, very tough, very sustainable, very easy to repair. The roof is asphalt shingles, 4-acre dimensional shingle. We're going to be putting several layers of insulation in this roof. Our values are going to be almost 40 in the walls and probably close to 55 to 60 in the roof. So, as we mentioned before, also there were some concerns about where the condensing units were going to be. This is going to be totally geothermal driven. There won't be any condensing units outside. It's a very quiet operation, very efficient. With closed loops, there won't be any moisture or any fluids that will be coming in and out of the system. It's a closed loop system. It'll go on. Probably have 6 350-foot deep wells that will circulate glycol and the coolant system within the equipment itself. If it does break open or anything, it's water soluble. It evaporates almost immediately. So it's a very safe and nature-friendly product. So I think it's going to work out really well there. We did try to make sure that we addressed a lot of the concerns that there were for the landscape plan. We did update some of the plantings to kind of get a little bit closer to the thing. You can see over here down in the lower section on the bottom, on the far western, or excuse me, the southern portion of the site. A lot of these trees, if you notice on the aerial photograph, a lot of those trees are in place, existing foliage. We think that that's a very effective screen along there. On the Progressive Drive side, we have added several arborvitaes and boxwoods and some of the decorative deciduous required. Along as you go a little bit further toward 59 toward Highland Road, we did add a few trees as a result of within that 100-foot span there. We did add some foliage and screening along the north end of the property line or the parking lot, and also along the far north edge of the property. 4 larger trees that you see there. Again, this is a sort of an abbreviated version of their writing facility, and again, we wanted to give it kind of a residential feel. We have very good high-quality windows, a lot of thick insulation. It's going to give us a very good art value. It's also going to be a very good sound insulator. So we think that we're going to have very low impact on the site. And again, Kurt and Christine are very excited to be a part of it.
Okay, great, thank you. If it works for the commission, what we could do is take the planning department's letter of April 16th and just go through the headings, the main headings. Anybody has any questions, we can ask them of David or the applicant, and we'll see if we can't just get through this in an orderly fashion.
The sample board, I'd like to show you the rendering. I think if you see this, it's a little bit better depiction.
The trim for the...
Yeah, this is the... I'm sorry, this is the aluminum trim. This is on the exterior. It's a dark anodized aluminum that's on the outside. The shake will be, the hardy shake will be this kind of sage color here. It's called... I'm sorry, it's called a black fox color. And the P1, this area here, is actually
an outer space color from Sherwin-Williams, but that's the trim color. It'll be on the AZEC and everything. And I'd like you to, if you want to
Great.
take that and pass it along.
Sure.
Colors look better than that one.
Right.
Okay. Do you have a copy of the planning department's letter?
I do,
Okay.
yes.
Well, if that works for you, we'll just follow along and we'll go through it. And I don't think there's anything really on page 1. It's the basic information. So if we look at page 2, I think Dave and the applicant has done a good job with the site description and an overview of the proposed use being 5,500 square feet. It looks like all the dimensional requirements are being met, including the deferred parking that we'll be talking on the next page. Are there any questions on that?
Well, the only thing, and I don't know where the proper place, because the letter doesn't really talk about this. If you remember back several years ago, we made a change in our ordinance that required people submitting site plans to superimpose their development over an aerial of the site, so that we could see what the impact was to the existing vegetation on the site. And we haven't been really good at following through on that with this applicant, or, I mean, it isn't something new. We just have never been good at that, and I would encourage Dave to try and insist on that going forward, because it would be nice to, I mean, I know their plan, kind of shows the tree line that they're planning to keep, but I think it would be easier to tell on that if it was superimposed on that area. I just figured the site thing was...
Sure. No, that's great. I think we can probably move to page 3, and the first topic to really talk about is the off-street parking and the request for deferring parking spaces.
One of the things we wanted to do is we really did a close study as to what's really required at the site. The owners, when we walked through this whole thing, we figured that the actual count was much more than we needed. We did, the engineering department was concerned that if later on we decided that there would be more parking required, we do have plenty of room to conform to all the requirements of the zoning ordinance. And we also wanted to make sure that the proposed storm drainage management plan is in place to allow for that additional parking. So our underground storage cauldrons are going to be able to handle in the initial installation any further, if we did decide to add 6 spaces. But again, trying to have as little impact on the site, we wanted to avoid putting any more pervious concrete or pervious asphalt and curb and gutter onto the site. So we asked permission to defer the 6 spaces that we don't really feel like we need at this point.
It's worth noting that they show as many as 42 in this deferred area down here, but per zoning ordinance, the deferral would only be for 6.
What would it change any of the removal of existing vegetation? Would there be any need, are we getting too far into that we would ultimately need to have some screening if that ever took place?
Right. If the for whatever reason the site plan had to come back to add this deferred parking, then those landscape standards would be applied to the expanded parking area.
Okay. So is it required to come back if they need the 6 spaces?
Correct.
Then?
Correct.
Okay. Comments? Generally support the deferral? Okay. Lighting. So the lighting plan that you brought out now has increased the lighting at the entrances. I think that was the main concern. I think the site lighting was okay. It was just the entrance lighting.
That's correct.
They were a little dim on the entrance lighting. I haven't had a chance to look at the one they handed us tonight, but we assume that it addresses that. Then that was the only outstanding item with lighting.
Okay. Landscaping. Let's just take them bullet point at a time. I guess the green belt along 59. You've got your 100 feet in there, and we need to determine whether the new green belt plantings combined with the existing vegetation satisfies the intent of the ordinance. Can you pull that up on the screen?
The landscape plan?
Yeah, the green belt landscaping.
The
updated one in there?
Yes.
Thank you.
This is this one's dated April 15th, so this is the most current. Yes.
So we're talking about the planting in the, right there, the 4 trees.
Correct.
And the
So per ordinance, the entire frontage is required to have a green belt along the entire frontage. What the applicant is requesting is to only apply the green belt requirement along this area here and have the existing vegetation, which extends further west, be applied toward satisfying the intent of the green belt requirement in lieu of possibly taking down existing vegetation to put in new vegetation.
Comments?
I have a comment.
Sure.
I agree. I mean, saving the existing vegetation, because it's a large mass, it seems to make a lot of sense than just to landscape with the 4 trees you have in this area. But the 10 U's behind that, I know that we have this other need for large shrubs, or I think the other part is ornamental trees. The intent is just to have this naturalistic pattern, and by doing those kind of, wiggle of views, I find it's just not really appropriate at all for the site.
Okay.
And I was hoping maybe to meet that intent, there could be a better solution than just randomly putting that little wave of views. It just doesn't seem to go with the rest of what's out there. Just a comment.
Any suggestion?
Well, I mean, I know the other option would be is to put in some ornamental, larger scale ornamental trees. I think because you've got this large mass of the large wetland tree mass, plus these kind of scattering out, something larger in size would be more appropriate than having just this little decorative, small little U's. So, I mean, even in quantity-wise, I don't know how we want to play it, but I think it would be far better to have a couple of those versus 10 of these formal little U's.
That would be great. We were sort of responding to
I know.
the letter,
To the ordinance requirements, and I just find that that's not, when it says our intent is to have a naturalistic, that isn't,
Yeah.
It's just kind of this...
If it was closer to the parking lot, I think it'd probably be more appropriate. But again, it would be very easy for us to add the, 3 ornamentals.
Ornamental, larger scale of the trees. It says either or in the ordinance.
So you leave the 4 trees that are there, take the 10 U's out, and
put
add
in maybe 3 of the ornamental. That would be the same cost, but it would be more in scale with everywhere else in sight. Just a comment, because you can see that's sitting in the midst of a lawn. It's kind of...
Yeah.
It's not what we're going for, especially when you got that big stroke of already existing vegetation. So they're already ahead of the game on, quantities.
Well, since that's your area of profession, I'm inclined to agree.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I think everyone would be happier with that, and you wouldn't have added costs, and I think it would be a better look.
That'd be great. We were just trying to respond almost to the letter of the law instead of substituting.
What kind of trees are those 4?
The 4 trees are the honey locust trees. We have those kind of here and there in the community.
Shade master
Drop
locust.
those pods.
The little leaves.
They have little tiny leaves. They don't have the pods.
No, they're not pods.
Those are the black locusts that have the pods.
Branches break all the time.
Well, I would support that, as I said.
Yeah. Do you guys agree?
Okay.
Can I hear one more time what the suggestion is?
So the suggestion would be to remove the 10 U's and replace those with 3 of the ornamental trees that the ordinance suggests. You either use large shrubs or you use ornamental trees, and they come back and give us a plan with 3 ornamental trees.
Thank you.
Are you in favor of, is the commission in favor of allowing the existing vegetation to fill the rest of the requirement?
Yes.
Yes.
Prefer to leave it alone.
Yeah.
Prefer you leave it? Okay, great. Doesn't look like under Greenbelt Progressive Drive there's much to talk about. It meets the requirement. Parking lot perimeter visible from public and private roads meets the requirements?
I don't think it does.
Oh, okay.
When I read the requirements for screening parking lots, in that section, what it says that we need to do is, it says they'll either have a berm or plantings, or you can have your evergreen hedgerow, which I think is the route you're going. And you're showing, it's a type of boxwood, it's a green gem, and it talks about at the time of planting, it should be 30 inches at a minimum height, and on your plan, if I'm reading it correctly, you're offering up 24-inch height, so it's not meeting that height. And ultimately, we're going for a 3-foot height, and the green gem, they don't ever achieve 3 feet in height. They're too small. They'll go maybe 2 feet, 2.5, but that's about it.
Should go like to pyramidal arborvitae or something would be...
You can go, I mean, even you could go back to your U's, but it's just those aren't the size per the ordinance first off installed, and then they're not meeting the height. And then finally on that one, you've got that spacing about 3 feet apart, and they never would have touched, so we never would have had a solid hedge. Another option you could do is you could look at like a lower juniper that's more of a spreading, because you kind of have a naturalistic site, so it's however you want to play it. The user, you could keep trimmed, or you could go with a juniper that's like a spreading one. There are some that will reach that height. It's whatever look you want, but the box one just won't achieve what we're going for.
Comments on that?
You agree?
I would agree.
Yeah, good observations.
Okay. So we are on page 5 now, and we're at the top there, parking lot perimeter not visible. Oh, we just covered that. Okay. Parking lot interior meets the requirements, building foundation meets the requirements. Jason?
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Parking lot perimeter not visible for public-private roads, which that would be the south parking lot. There are landscaping requirements for screening a parking lot not otherwise visible from a public road, and at the risk of speaking for the applicant, I believe what they're proposing is to be credited for the existing vegetation as effectively screening the south parking lot in lieu of doing something like a hedgerow or a berm or whatever else along the south side. So what I'm hoping is a determination from the Planning Commission whether or not the existing vegetation does effectively screen the south end of the parking lot.
Well, can I tie it into the one that is adjacent to the residential then, too? Because we're going to count the trees both ways. And if it's screening it from the residential, I understand what the ordinance is saying. I'm inclined to say it's screening enough.
The only thing that's hard to tell, I'm not trying to cause any troubles, is that, it's got that nice ground cover. Also, there's some dense, scrub. I don't know in the wintertime, which we have still kind of going on now, if we drove in there tonight, because we can't tell, as Larry said, we couldn't really see where the building landed on the existing site. But if we drove in there and we went to park, if our headlights would be shining into those neighbors, I don't know. That's the only thing, when you have a 3-foot height screen, at least it blocks the lights, and you're not shining into someone's home. With that wintertime, all the foliage is down, I just don't know if it's dense enough. That would be the only concern. Tons of trees. It's that ground plane. If you were living there, you might be kind of frustrated with that nighttime and the wintertime, those lights. I can't tell that. That's the hard thing to know.
The winter, like right now,
Yeah.
there's very little, nothing's
That's
blooming
right.
now, and it's very difficult to see anything beyond there. It's fairly thick.
Right.
And the owners are planning to keep that as natural as they can.
Yeah.
But I was hoping that it was there's probably close to 200 feet of
Yes.
foliage before it really, before it thins out to the residential area. I think if we could look at the aerial photograph, I
Sure.
could kind of point out where the building is.
There's a pointer here.
That's the hard.
Yeah, there's a huge, I think
I
that's...
could offer this. Oh, maybe you can get one. Would you like a pointer? Would that help you? Yeah. There you go. Buttons on the side.
Yeah, you see the one here, along this area here, our driveway, if you look at the way our building is actually here in the parking probably not extend much further than what's here, but you can see all this area here is very thick. You're not really, this sort of shows the vertical taller trees here.
Sure.
Below here, almost from, probably 18 inches to 6 feet is heavy foliage and bushes, and even right now it's very difficult to see anything along here, along this area here, especially on our property. We do have a little bit of screening coming out towards the street as our landscape plan shows, but you can see the distance from here to here is probably, these residences here is probably over 400 feet.
Yeah, I drove in the other day just for the purpose of this application, and I thought it was fairly dense. I mean, I wasn't thinking about that at the time, other than knowing there was residential there, how much you didn't see. So that might help answer the question.
It's very difficult any time of the year to see a house from M59. And the intent of the ordinance is for a new development, and with no screening, no trees. And they have natural screening already in place. I would prefer to leave them alone, and I think they'll be dense enough and far enough away from the houses, their residents, that it won't be a problem. And actually, the property next door doesn't have noise near the amount either.
Well, and
There's no complaints there.
well, and it would be nice to have a place to push the snow. And if you got a bunch of shrubs there, it's a little harder to push the
Well, you
snow.
have
No,
to
that's
tear
a
up the
good
shrubs
point.
that are there to probably,
Right.
some of them are going to go away.
And any snow amount at all is going to mound to 3 feet rather quickly.
Yeah.
But I would say I did go in there just because I wanted to familiarize myself with the site. I don't remember the house part
Right.
being any issue.
Right, and I did too, and it looked way off in the distance. I just thought it's just hard to know.
Right.
Okay,
So, parking lot perimeter not visible from the public or private roads. Are we satisfied with what they have on the plan? Does that work for you?
I think so.
All righty. And then I guess down at the bottom of that section there, adjacent to the residential, the overall screening. Are you satisfied leaving the existing?
With the understanding that if additional parking were to be put in, we would review that?
That's what I'm hearing.
Yeah.
They would have to come back for an amended site plan if they were to expand the parking lot.
Okay.
Okay. All right, pedestrian amenities.
I'm sorry, here I come again.
Yep.
The building foundation, it talks about, in there, it says that we need foundation landscaping to be 8 feet in width, and I'm not seeing that. And it says it was met, but it talks about building foundation to be 8 feet in width. So let's look at the north side, and there's the building, right? And there's the sidewalk. Right? So is there an 8-foot width there of landscape? I know it has to be 60%, but I just wasn't
Right.
sure how we counted that.
The way the planning department considered that was, there's and I need to find it again, there's a provision that says foundation landscaping should also coordinate with the pedestrian facilities.
Okay.
So the fact that they provided a sidewalk along 3 of the 4 sides of the building, we tried to credit them for that. And also, again, we didn't want to push the site out any further than necessary and take out more vegetation than necessary in order to create new areas for new landscaping. So with that in mind, and also the fact that the foundation landscaping, in our opinion, coordinated with the sidewalk around the perimeter, that was our thought process in not holding them too tightly to the 8-foot requirement.
Okay. Because the next part in our ordinance says, or it should be 10 feet in width when it is located between the building and a parking area. And that's another part of our ordinance. And so there we are between a building and a parking area, and there it says it should be 10 feet in width.
Is that talking about with or without a sidewalk?
Not that I can...
Right.
So if you
And-
throw the sidewalk in there, I
Yeah.
think the dimensions are changing.
Yeah, they are.
And I'm certainly not disagreeing, I'm just giving you an alternative, or what our thought process was. They could potentially, at the, the Planning Commission can certainly consider this, but if they didn't want to have the sidewalk, then the alternative would be no sidewalk, but additional foundation landscaping. And that's not that not that that's an ultimatum that the applicant threw out there, but we kind of weighed the benefits of the proper width of foundation landscaping versus the provision of a sidewalk, and we thought that having the sidewalk was a benefit.
And it is a benefit, I agree. I was just trying to follow also what we're saying in our ordinance, and
Correct.
it's just, once you allow it in one place, then we're going to hear from another place. They're going to want the same. And I like the open space. I totally would rather have the land untouched and leave the footprint smaller, and all the things you're doing is wonderful. I'm just looking at the ordinance, trying to understand when it says it's been met. I'm not seeing that, and maybe this is fine. I mean, because again, all around it, it's wonderful.
We, as a staff, could have explained that better in the building foundation, and that's on us as a department. There was a relatively quick turnaround with when the plans were received, and to the applicant's credit, I mean, they worked with us on getting some issues cleaned up on the landscape plan on relatively short notice. But there was a quick turnaround in getting the landscape plan reviewed, and so those items that we could have explained better, I guess that's my best explanation for why they didn't get explained better, is trying to get this turned around as quickly as possible and get the agenda packets out.
Dave, is there a green belt at all between the sidewalk and the building, that little segment, or is that sidewalk right up against the building?
On this side?
Yeah.
So these are I think those are the boxwoods here and here.
Right.
And then
There's a small band about 18 inches along the entire north end of the building.
And we-
Two 30-inch planter boxes there. The area that you're pointing to now, Mr. Campbell, that's almost 10 or 12 feet wide by 20 feet long. So that we're hoping that should take credit for some of it, because we could, actually take that out and put it up against the building and make that another parking space. But
that was part of our consideration as well, was crediting them for this area here, technically not right up against the building foundation, but again, coordinating it with the sidewalk feature.
What is the material of that 18-inch band you were referring to?
there would be, it would actually be probably lawn, or would be grass along the edge.
It would be something not...
One of the things we're kind of careful about is the animals, when they come in from the parking lot, dogs notoriously find the first vertical thing so we got to be really, it's like against the building, we're sort of worried about, because that'll kill a plant like in 2 weeks. It happens really fast, and we're trying to provide a quick way for people to get in and out, but again, the dog, before it goes inside, is probably going to relieve itself outside. So we're trying to kind of minimize the amount of foliage directly against the building.
That is an organic material that would be maintained. It's not gravel or rock.
No,
not bark or anything.
No, we don't want that look is not what we're going for. We learned a lot on the first facility in Brighton, and that was one of the things we wanted to make sure that it was a natural, even a St. Augustine or a real hardy grass that would almost look like crabgrass here, but it's something that would be very resilient to the kind of abuse it's going to get.
And around the back side, I think that'd be the south side.
Right.
That's a walkway right up against the wall.
Yeah, and that's going to be our loading and unloading, and our the dumpster enclosures down there at the bottom. So we figured that was going to get a lot of activity that might, trucks rolling over top of the curb and onto the plantings and everything. So we're trying to, keep that area unencumbered as we could. We also worked with the fire marshal. We had a couple more planting areas in the approach drive, and the fire marshal didn't want us to have them there because they thought that the larger trucks wouldn't be able to make that turn without running over. So we
did have a lot more shown originally, and kind of trimmed back a little bit just to make the egress and ingress easier for the fire marshal equipment.
I just wanted to bring it to our attention, just because it said it had been met, and I just wanted to be clear,
Okay,
you know, that's something we're agreeing to.
okay. Are you okay with it? Everybody all right with it?
Yeah, I can understand Sue's concern with the ordinance, but I'm comfortable with the adjustments that the planning department gave, and I'm okay with it.
Well, there's a lot of screening in front of it.
Right.
If you back that print up and show a little bit more of the north, Dave, I mean, you've got the whole parking lot screened
Right.
across
Yeah.
there. And either way, you got the natural buffer that they're leaving or coming from the other direction, all the way on the other side of the boulevard, you've got that screen. Not sure what elevations are, but it's certainly not going to look barren
No.
by any stretch.
I think we prefer it. It's less, you know, like you said, you're keeping your footprint little. Again, I just wanted to bring it up that it wasn't quite met.
Yeah.
Well, and I think when we revised the landscape ordinance, our thought was that we wanted the ability, and we wrote it in there that these things, we wanted these things so that we would have the opportunity to discuss at the planning commission level whether what they were doing, we could.
So it meets the intent.
Right. So I appreciate you pointing it out, and I think it's important. It is a discussion that the commission needs to have when these kind of things come up. So,
Yeah,
but I would say that it seems
To meet our
pretty
intent.
attractive.
Yep.
we wrote it so they would be creative, and now
Right.
that's what we're allowing, right? Creativity.
That's right.
Okay, very good. Let's see, we covered building foundation adjacent to residential, we covered. There is no basin, so we have nothing there. Pedestrian amenities. Dave, can you...
So it is up to the discretion of the planning department whether or not to require a pedestrian walkway along the frontage of M59. We as a department would certainly advocate for it, and they are, it is shown along, I'm trying to get to the correct site plan as I'm talking. They are proposing I believe an 8-foot sidewalk along the M59 frontage from one end of their property to the other. It's in here along with all the proposed 8-foot safety path. What they're not proposing, and the planning department is okay with this, is they're not proposing a sidewalk actually leading from that safety path to the front door of their building. But that could be something that the planning commission may want to discuss. Again, the planning commission does have the discretion to require pedestrian amenities. So the question would be whether that spur from the proposed safety path to the front door is something that would be warranted for this type of use.
So, Dave, would I understand it that if, let's say, someone was walking down that 8-foot safety path along M59, and they wanted to walk their pad, let's say, right to the business, they would then step on the roadway, the driveway, and walk then to the business or across the lawn?
Right. Well, yeah, I suppose they could walk in the grass, but most likely what people are going to do is just walk along Progressive Drive, which, at the risk of speaking for the applicant, I would think they might say that that's a low-volume traffic road, and having a sidewalk along it would be duplicative of being able to just walk along the side of the road.
And I would probably add that there isn't a lot of residential that close. I don't view this to be a foot traffic type business, and even if it wasn't a vet clinic and it was a, you know, your regular MD, OD doctor, or whatever it is, I just don't think that this type of area needs a path from the sidewalk to the entrance of the building. If we were talking in an area where we had a lot of residential close by and it was an ice cream store, we might see something different. But here, I don't know that I think it's necessary personally.
And I think filling one more gap along our safety path network along M59, every time we can get one more connection, which we do have safety path existing on either side, so now we're filling one of those gaps, and that certainly is an improvement in our non-motorized network that we're trying to build.
Right. Far more important to have that than than the other piece. So, any other comments on it?
I mean, I agree with everything you guys are saying. I would just state that if you go a little bit to the west of there, to the office building, it does have a connection to an office that I would say you could probably say the same thing, isn't really a foot traffic type of building, yet they were required to put one in. But
Well, I don't know if they were required or not. They have one. But I guess if we have the option,
people put that in without us saying to put it in. So-
I guess if we have the option, I would say what I said. And a sidewalk for a sidewalk that no one, I don't believe that use. I just don't think anybody lives close enough to walk their dog to the vet. So, thoughts?
Doesn't mean it's always going to be a vet building.
Well, whatever.
But I agree with you.
There is no residential close enough
Yeah.
that's going to happen. You're more likely to have people going for a long walk, but that's not the destination,
I agree.
or a runner.
Yep.
Yeah?
For sure.
Okay.
Okay.
All righty, how about page 6? Of course, the sign now is administratively reviewed and approved. Stormwater management.
Here I am again. So if we do a sign, okay, just to read the ordinance on what's required around the sign, right now you're showing hosta, is that perennial? And that's not what our ordinance requires. It requires certain size beds, different mix of evergreen plants and shrubs. Is that right?
It is, and what I will say is that the planning department specifically did not review the landscaping around the sign in this instance because we know that it's going to have to come back for its own sign permit, including for the monument sign, and it's at that point that we will review the landscaping plan around the base of the future monument sign.
Right, okay.
That will be a condition.
Yeah.
Meeting those landscaping requirements around the base of the monument sign is always one of the things that we review as part of the sign permit for the new monument sign.
And I know this isn't our realm anymore, but the only thing I wonder about is that location. Because if I'm going down M59, and given the amount of screening that you have along 59, am I going to have a hard time figuring out where your business is? And I'm wondering if it wouldn't be better for that monument sign to actually be out towards your M59 frontage rather than back there. That's just my suggestion, and I know it's not...
It's your choice, not ours.
That's just my concern. I could see people going by there because they might not even see this building once all that shrubbery and everything grows in.
Well, I guess what he's saying is feel free to move it within wherever you can, and his opinion is 59 would be better visibility for you.
Thank you. That's a good suggestion.
Stormwater management, Dave?
The notable thing on this one is that this site is within the area of proposed Hartland drain number 5, and I think I included what that drain may look like someday, conceptual plan that was done by HRC. The applicant, so as to not make this area south of their site is prone to flooding, which is why it's envisioned as a potential future drain. The applicant, so as to not contribute or exacerbate an existing prone to flooding, is going to retain all their new stormwater underground. They're going to do underground detention, and then the water within those detention bays will, at its own rate, make its way back into the soil. And so the engineer has some comments with regards to that. I know they did some revisions per our engineer, and there's some conditions that HRC wants to see addressed on the construction plans, but their recommendation overall is for site plan approval.
Okay, well, we have several of these in the community. The only thing that I remember that we didn't mention here is, don't they have maintenance agreements that allow, or were those just in the PDs, that allowed the township or the drain commissioner to enter if necessary? Do you
It
recall
seems to me
something?
Leo's has one,
Yeah,
and this wasn't a PD.
and they have a maintenance agreement,
Right.
don't they? So, there are requirements somewhere just to basically say, hey, we're going to take care of this, and this is how often, and this is what we do?
Take care of,
The underground detention.
I will, I'll check into what the agreements would be for that.
But if I remember right, when Leo's presented that, it was definitely new to us.
Right.
And that's a concern we had, because historically, they have problems with them if they're not maintained properly. And that was the kind of compromise that Leo agreed to, was that he'd do a maintenance agreement and he'd spell out the type of frequency of maintenance and whatever typical would be in.
Yeah, it's not called out here in the letter, and that it requires one. I'm just thinking that for some reason it did, because they were out of sight, out of mind.
Yeah, if the planning commission is willing, depending on what decisions are made tonight, you could certainly include that in the motion, and I could follow up with HRC and the applicant's engineer to get that part addressed. It's not something that came up in our conversations with the engineers leading up to this.
Well, I'm not positive where the...
It might have been through the engineering.
We've got it at Walgreens. We've got several of them around here. And I just...
It may be in our
maintenance agreements.
It may be in our design and construction standards too, which the engineers are more familiar with than I am.
Okay.
Now, Dave, it seems to me that some of the meetings I was in before this stormwater management, it was discussed at those meetings as being a retention rather than detention. Is that still what is?
My understanding is it's detention, so the water makes its way into these holding tanks and then slowly dissipates out as the soil around it can take it on. So it naturally percolates its way back into the soil, as opposed to retention, which is, they'd be in there. They would fill up eventually, and the water has nowhere to go.
But it's going to go to groundwater, not
Yes.
to surface water.
Correct. It's not going to, it by design, shouldn't make its way down this natural floodplain through here.
Okay.
Okay, well, here it is in HRC's letter. Apologize for not catching it when I read it. It does say, in the general information, all easements are to be in a recordable form prior to approval of the as-built plans. They include legal description, sketch of the easements and parcel, and a cover sheet. At this time, the required easements may include the water main and detention basin maintenance agreement. So it's in the letter.
I did read it. It's there.
So did I. And I read over it.
I never know what the engineers are talking about anyway.
It could happen for this parking lot to flood for the
Right.
client, so it's going to be well-maintained.
And I've never heard of a problem with any of the ones we've had.
But we have no problem with that. If you want to write that would be simple.
Actually,
It's a term of the it's a term of the engineer's letter, and therefore could
it's already covered.
there you go.
We're done with that. Any other question on stormwater? Okay. Architecture and building materials. They're requesting a waiver for the wood siding and the asphalt shingles and the underage of the brick. You like what it looks like?
I like that picture there better than this picture here as far as color. It's a little dark.
Yeah, it's hard to read, sorry.
Once I saw the picture on the board he had...
We really didn't want it to be all brick because we didn't...
The sample board, definitely.
The cost for going all brick is, there's no cost savings to making it all brick. Or the cedar shake that we're using is a very expensive product, so I mean, it would probably be a wash. The masonry and the hardy plank
cementitious fiber cedar is almost exactly, it's about $8.50 a square foot, no matter what. What we wanted to do is to make it not look like an office building. We wanted to have sort of a residential feel, a little bit more of an organic look. So the band along the base is pretty much to protect the building functionally as well as give it a little bit of a protection. The cedar, like I mentioned, the cedar shake, the painted shake is there to give it more of a residential theme. And it's very tough. I mean, you can hit that product with a golf club and it won't break. It's very tough. It is made up with cement fiber and wood chips mixed into a molded type of millwork.
Well, while different, this is of similar look to the Brighton Township facility. It still has that characteristic about it that you're carrying across. Different colors, smaller. And that's a pretty good looking building.
Craftsman look.
To be honest with you.
An organic look.
That's a great looking facility.
Did the Brighton facility use the same hardy board?
Yes, we did. We used hardy plank on that as well.
So over time, that doesn't fade? It doesn't what?
No. It's a great, that's one of the, it's an expensive downstroke on it, but it pays for itself. It takes up, if the paint fails over time, there's no, the product itself doesn't rot and it doesn't separate or spall like regular wood does or even brick. It's a little tougher, a little bit more resilient, dries out quicker. It holds paint too. It's very, it comes pre-primed. And when you paint it, it soaks in about a 1/16 of an inch, so it really takes the paint very well. We haven't done any maintenance on
How old is that
Brighton
building?
facility.
How old is that structure at Brighton? You haven't had to maintain it, the exterior, you haven't?
That hardy plank, whether it's, I don't think you see it in the shake, but I'm sure it's the same form in the siding. You see that used on a lot of residential housing, and I can say, I know people that have 10, 12, 13-year-old houses that haven't painted them yet, and they don't look like they need it.
My house has hardy plank on it.
It is pretty durable.
Yeah, it's very durable. Mine's about 10 years. I am going to paint mine. It's just starting to fade, but I mean, it's excellent.
Yeah.
And all of this brick along the base, that's the reclaimed brick?
Yes, that's the brick sample I brought here. Yeah, it's called blast furnace slag. This is what they use inside the blast furnace steel. You can kind of see it's really kind of a neat product. It's almost like a glass.
Yeah.
It's melted and tore it off of the interior. They lined the interior of the blast furnaces so that they could
cool.
on the steel. And then after a while, the brick starts to fail and they just chip it off. Well,
Wow.
they piled it up all over the Fort Wayne area. And then Brick Tech went out there and grabbed it and they're using it all over.
Wow.
So it's like a standard size brick? It is, yeah.
It's a little, well,
fun.
that's a good, no, it's actually a little bit wider. It's about 1.5 inches longer than the horse.
Sharp.
Yeah.
It's very attractive.
It looks, it gives it kind of an ancient look. We want it to look like it was there for a long time.
Yeah. So are we in support of the architectural waiver?
A question about the trim. So that I'm picturing the hardy board. Is the trim then around the windows the aluminum material that was on your sample board?
Oh, the aluminum is for the window cladding. The windows are wood, but they're clad with aluminum on the exterior, and the inside will be painted or stained. The trim that you see around the outside of the frame, that's AZEC. It's another product that's a little bit more malleable than hardy plank. It has a little bit more of a plastic content to it because you can form it so that it's a little bit more intricate. So the trim and the casings around the window and the door frames, we're using AZEC, and it's a little bit more expensive than hardy plank, but it has, you can mill it a little bit better, you can bend it, you can do mitered corners. With hardy plank, if you try to do a miter, for instance, it chips and breaks, and it's hard to deal with, like for intricate type of casing. So we're using this AZEC product, which is also like a 100-year lifespan on it as well. It's made of melted milk pods and wood chips and fiberglass. It's molded into a long bar stock that has wood grain and everything. So it looks very realistic, and it works like wood, like good sanded.
Everybody okay?
Yeah.
All right. So we're on to page 7. No rooftop equipment, so that one's an easy one. Dumpster enclosure. Dave?
The plans did not include any details on the dumpster enclosure. Typically, what you want to see is a enclosure that matches the building material. And Mr. Hart, correct me if I'm wrong, but we discussed this, and I think you had mentioned that that would be something that could be included on the construction plans as a dumpster enclosure showing the height and the materials and the design, the gates. And the question remaining, which is up to the discretion of the Planning Commission, is any landscaping screening around that dumpster enclosure in addition to the enclosure matching the materials of the building.
So is the matching material this brick, then?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. That's typically what you see around town.
And it also, when we have a lot of plantings around, if some of the refuse falls out of the bags or breaks open, it's hard to clean up, so we kind of kept it a little bit more sparse along there because it's very...
But the alternative is what ends up happening if it's not caught by that, it's blowing around. That's why it's not hard to clean up, because it's not there and not caught by anything.
Right. That's a good point. It's blowing somewhere else.
Fine with it. I know on another plan a while ago, we had eliminated the planting around the dumpster enclosure because it's well screened with the brick, you know?
I think it depends on where it is on the site. In this case, there's a lot of natural vegetation to the west, so nobody's looking at it from that direction.
Yeah.
I think if it were out in the open more, possibly the enhancement of some landscaping would be good. Personal opinion. Thoughts? Larry, do you want it for trash pickup or collecting it?
Well, it looks bare to me, but it's not. I understand what you guys are saying.
Well, there's a tree there.
Yeah, you got a tree. Now that circle is when the tree is 35 years old, though.
There will be sod around the perimeter. It'll be grass around it.
Okay.
You'll just have to go farther to pick up the trash if it be in some of those other
Trees out there.
Okay. Loading space, nice that you have one, meets the requirements. Future drain. Dave, any comments other than...
No, I just have an overview on that. There is, if you'll see when we do get to page 9 in the planning department's recommended motion of approval, there is one of the conditions would be that they include a note on the plan agreeing to a future easement to accommodate Hartland Drain number 5.
Okay. Township Department of Public Works review. He approves it with 3 contingencies. Anything to add to that? Or
I think these are all items that are pretty standard that could be easily included on the construction plans.
Okay. Engineers review, same thing? He has
Same thing.
No objections?
Right.
Fire department?
You didn't even have any conditions.
No. So he was
You didn't
happy.
ask for an address or key box.
Yeah.
The heck?
He did, the applicant did do some significant revisions to the parking lot layout and the proposed driveways in order to address the fire marshal's first review.
Originally, huh?
Yeah.
He did.
So I shouldn't say he doesn't have any issues. He doesn't have any issues anymore.
All right. You know, you just usually see something, so you did a good job. Okay, at this point, are there any other questions or comments, thoughts you want to add to the particular plan and review? Dave, I think I'm correct in saying this is the first site plan that the Planning Commission will make the final decision.
Yes, I wish I had mentioned that, and we discussed that with the applicant, and that's part of the reason, there was a point where we were looking at making a March meeting date, and we agreed that procedurally it made more sense to hold off a couple weeks until the amendments to the zoning ordinance went into effect so that the Planning Commission would have the authority to approve a site plan such as this.
Okay. So you'll notice when you make your motion, it's not a recommend approval or denial, it's an approval or not.
If there is a motion forthcoming, I know the planning department did recommend or provide some recommended motion language. A couple of those things may need to be tweaked, particularly the consensus was a few changes to the landscape plan, so hopefully those changes can be incorporated into the motion languages if there is one coming.
Okay. Is the commission comfortable with the motion tonight, or do you need to have this come back with the changes that we talked about?
Comfortable with it.
Comfortable. Larry, you good with it?
Yeah.
Okay. Guys good?
Yeah.
Okay. At this point, I guess we're ready to entertain a motion.
Move to approve site plan application number 519, the Town and Country Animal Clinic, including the recognition of the following. The proposed building elevations satisfy the intent of the building materials requirements of section 5.24, and a partial waiver of those requirements is hereby granted. And the proposed landscape plan satisfies the intent of section 5.11 and the changes that were per discussion tonight. Deferral of 6 required parking spaces. Can I read all this?
Yeah, you do.
Site plan approval is subject to the following conditions being adequately addressed on the stamping sets. Satisfaction of the items listed in the Hartland Township Department of Public Works correspondence dated March 10th, 2014, and satisfaction of the outstanding items listed in the HRC Consulting Engineering correspondence dated March 14th, 2014. Also, an addition of a note on the plan indicating that upon request, access to the property, likely in the form of an easement, will be granted for the development of drain number 5. And detail of the dumpster enclosure shall be provided and shall be in compliance with the applicable standards contained in zoning ordinance. And revision of the photometric plan to meet the minimum illumination requirements at both the building entrance and the entry-exit drive. That's it, I think.
Got it all covered? I
I
second.
think we had anything else.
Okay, we have a motion to approve site plan application number 519 from Commissioner Voigt, a second from Commissioner Grissom. Is there any further discussion?
Yeah, I had a question for Dave on the ordinance. What does the ordinance say about the dumpster enclosure?
That the enclosure needs to match the building, that the enclosure needs to be 6 feet high, it needs to have gates, it needs to have a concrete pad so that you don't have the heavy trash trucks sinking into the asphalt in July. I believe it says there needs to be bollards in the back of the enclosure so that when they throw the dumpster back down, they're not crashing it into the back of the enclosure and knocking it over. And it says that landscaping can be required at the discretion of the Planning Commission.
Okay. So, it concerns me a little bit that we're not seeing that, because when we just reference that it comply with the ordinance, and the ordinance says that it matched the building, we have a lot of different materials on that building. I really would not want to see a dumpster enclosure that had a band of brick at the bottom and hardy plank siding, up from there to 6 feet in height.
If I unless I misunderstood, was the whole enclosure going to be the brick?
Yeah, we did call it out as full masonry.
We amend them.
I just wonder if we could put that in the motion rather than just comply that it be built of brick.
Brick to match the building. You okay with that, Keith?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Any further discussion? So this is a motion to approve the site plan. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries.
Thank you very
Well,
much.
congratulations and thank you, and welcome to Hartland.
When do you expect you'll be open?
Said
Great.
So it's a very attractive building. A great job on it. Looks really nice.
Yeah, let me hold on to them. Are you going to miss them if I need them for a little bit?
No problem.
Okay.
It's going to take, let's take the, or you need to render this. It's going to take one of these back.
That brick sample is the same as the other? Okay. You want to take the rendering back, though?
Do you need it? You still need this?
Yeah, we can show it off. Do you mind? Okay. I can see us showing it off a little bit.
Here's your placard.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Have a good night. Yep. Next up, item 9, call to the public. No. Planners report, item 10.
Thanks again. So the Planning Department's going to host a meeting on Tuesday morning that we hope that as many planning commissioners and township board members are able to attend. That meeting is going to be about the pending, it's going to be a public input workshop about the pending amendments to the sign regulations of the zoning ordinance. A quick reminder, those are agritourism signage, the possibility of portable signage within the village area, possible new provisions for freestanding signage for home-based businesses, and the possibility of donor recognition signage. So we want to present those for where we stand with those to the public and to our business community and see what they have to say. So again, I encourage the planning commissioners to attend if possible. It's going to be Tuesday morning, 8 a.m. Right here. In anticipation of that meeting, the Planning Department had a meeting with the Ordinance Review Committee this evening, just before this meeting, and we talked specifically about those signs and got some good initial feedback from the Ordinance Review Committee on a lot of those topics, and hopefully that feedback will be valuable to us when we go to the public on Tuesday morning. Again, it's intentionally, this workshop's being held very early in the process before any decisions have been made. We want to get as much input from the public as possible before we as a department get going too far in any one direction on research and recommendations. And we also want to keep both, obviously, the Ordinance Review Committee and this Planning Commission in the loop as these go along, so that, again, nothing gets going too far that's taking us in the wrong direction. We will be having a meeting on May 8th, and we know that because the Safer Roads and Pathways Plan will be presented to the Planning Commission. Then that will also be advertised to the public as a town hall meeting for that Safer Roads and Pathways Plan, so there will be an opportunity for public input. So in your Planning Commission packets for May 8th, you'll be getting a copy of the latest revised version of that Safer Roads and Pathways Plan, and hopefully you'll have an opportunity to look through that, and opportunity for this Planning Commission to ask questions, and also an opportunity for the public to give us their input on it and where it stands to this point. We're having a meeting with MDOT and with the Road Commission on Speedway's conceptual plans for expansion, and we're looking to do that next Tuesday. I need to check my calendar. Larry maybe help me out. Is it next Tuesday? Does that sound right, the 29th? Anyway, meeting with both MDOT and with the Livingston County Road Commission on the Speedway plan, so that all three agencies kind of get their heads around what the issues are as far as access and traffic management. and kind of get a good foundation for where we would want to see that project go. We continue to hold the meetings with our major developers. We had one today, in fact, and that makes 4 out of the 5 meetings have been held. The last meeting is with the Ramco Gershenson Group. We've had 2 meetings with them that have been postponed because they've been pulled out of town for Planning Commission meetings in Wisconsin and Illinois. So we're working to reschedule it, and once we have that, that'll be the 5th of the 5 meetings we're hoping to have. The plans for the Taco Bell, the stamping sets got submitted earlier this week and are being stamped by the various agencies, the engineer and DPW and the fire marshal, so getting close to a pre-construction meeting on that one. The up-to-date zoning ordinance is now available on the township's website, and I think I sent all of you an email about that today with a link to the website. And we also are working with Clear Zoning on getting some hard copies printed, and those of you who want a hard copy, a complete new hard copy, not a bunch of insert pages, but just one complete revised ordinance, let me know, and we'll get those to you as soon as we receive them from the folks at Clear Zoning. And just an update on so we had the joint meeting with the Township Board earlier in April, and got some good direction there on where we want to go with the update to the comprehensive plan. And we think what's going to drive that to a large degree is the housing market analysis that the Township Board has agreed that they want to proceed with. So the Township is going to work with a consultant on looking at what the current housing market is in Hartland and what it is over the next 5-10 years, and what those recommendations are will probably play a significant role in how we look at some of the large vacant or underdeveloped parcels within the township that we feel have good potential for particularly residential redevelopment. That is what I have on my list of things to discuss with you tonight as part of my planner's report.
All right, thank you. Committee reports, item 11. Anyone? Anything?
Dave, I know that the blight ordinance is working its way towards the board.
Yes.
Where did it end up with some of those issues that we brought up about the maintaining of large acreage piece of properties?
We took another look at those. We made some revisions. I know the township attorney also made some revisions. He helped us out with better definition of what a noxious weed is and some lists of noxious weeds. But based on conversation with the attorney and feedback from the Planning Commission and with the township manager, we are still looking to do things like have it in the ordinance at least that you have to keep your frontage maintained, particularly if you're a large lot that's adjacent to smaller lots or smaller residential subdivisions, is what's going to be the ordinance now. How that gets enforced is going to be kind of on a case-by-case basis, but we want to have the tool in the toolbox, as they say, to if we do get in a situation where there is some vegetation issues that need to be addressed, we do have the resources available to do it. And you, as a board member, will obviously be seeing it hopefully May 7th.
Okay.
And if the board so chooses to send it back to the Planning Commission, then that will be the direction we go.
Anything else, Larry? Anyone else? Anything?
Nope.
All right, we are at item 12, adjournment. Could we have a motion, please?
Move to adjourn.
Support. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Thank you. And good